Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with Real Deal Talk. Today, we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Cassidy Freitas, in the house. Welcome, Cassidy.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. I'm excited. I mean, I'm podcasting a lot these days, but it's not usually like in this sort of scenario. I mean, you've got a really incredible space.
Yeah, we ain't playing around here.
No, you're not.
We're not playing games here.
This is the real deal.
This is the real deal. The real deal, ladies and gentlemen. So Dr. Cassidy Freitas here is a licensed marriage and I keep forgetting.
Family therapist.
Family therapist. Yeah. I am fired up about this interview because we're going to break it down. Because this day and age, and I talk about this a lot with parenting, right? Like what's going on these days. So we're going to dig deep into this, folks. So stick around. This is going to be an extremely informational podcast today. Not that it ever isn't, but just saying.
Especially today.
Especially today. We got a doctor in the house. Yeah. So, and first and foremost, let me thank everybody for tuning in to Real Deal Talk here. I can't tell you enough how much it means to me and all the feedback I get whenever I'm around town or at the church, people coming up to me, telling me how much it's certain interviews have impacted you. So I can't thank you enough for tuning in. If you want to support the show financially, Real Deal Sleep is paying the bills around here. So come on down, purchase a mattress, go to the website, realdealsleep.com. We've got pillows, sheets, sleep system, zero gravity, which will help if you or your significant other snoring. We can help with that. And by the way, Cassidy, that's how we met.
That is how we met.
That's how we originally met.
My whole family sleeps on Real Deal mattresses and pillows.
Yes, folks, look at this. And I just, as I'm speaking, I'm remembering, oh yeah, that's how we met.
No. So let me share some of the context. So my husband met you first because he came in, we needed a new mattress, and he found you probably through Google, through word of mouth, and came in and he was like, babe, I found it. And he brought home the fanciest mattress I have ever slept on. And here's the thing is that we were going to have another baby, and it was a game changer. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but sleep is one of the first things that I ask new parents about because it is such a, can we cuss on here?
You can do whatever you want.
Okay. I was like, because, okay.
You do whatever you want. Let it fly.
Mark get explicit. But
let it fly, sister.
It's, when it comes to postpartum, sleep is going to be shit. Like you've got a newborn. It's a brand new human being who's like figuring out how to survive in this new world outside of the womb. And sleep is going to be super shitty. But when we're not sleeping, when we're sleep deprived, when sleep is not going well, the impact that has on everything, on our communication. So like everything's rougher around the edges, middle of the night, and you and your partner are trying to like figure out why the baby's crying, and you're, it's not pretty.
Right.
It's not pretty.
Yeah. To put it mildly.
Yeah. To put it mildly. And then the impact that it has on anxiety, the risk factor it puts into depression, the impact it has on everything. And so, we were like, we're going to invest in good sleep. Yep. And, it was a real good deal.
Yes, it was a real deal, ladies and gentlemen.
A real good deal.
Yeah, you went all out. You guys got zero gravity, massage feature.
Here's the thing, that one of the features that I was like, what? Like, because, you can like make the head go up and down, the feet can go up and down. When I was postpartum and I'm in those middle of the night feeds, being able to, it saved me. It saved my back. Like, I'm sitting there and like, okay, we're in here for a nursing session and you don't know how long it's going to last. And when you're tired and you're just like, okay, I just need to like make this happen and get back to bed. And so a lot of times you're just like making it happen, and your back's killing you.
Yeah.
And then the impact that has on everything the next day. It was a game changer.
Yeah. And all you do is press a button.
All you do is press a button.
Inclines the head, feed, bada bing, bada boom. Bring the head back down. Yeah. Right.
And there's also like a massage vibration impact, and the impact that has had on, like, at the end of the day, when my brain and Dave's brain is like racing, because that's just from an evolutionary perspective, that actually makes sense, right? Our ancestors that survived were the ones that were up at night, like on high alert. So it makes sense that, like, we just haven't figured that out, it out yet, like that, we're safer at night. But yeah, the brain's racing. There's something about that that's so grounding.
Right.
It's like, okay, I am here. I am now. I am safe. Like it like gets me back into my body. It's great.
It's how I fall asleep every single night is with my massage feature.
Yeah,
I can't fall asleep without it.
Well, I don't know how I will ever again fall asleep without it. I go to a hotel and I'm like, wait.
Yeah, this thing doesn't vibrate. What's the problem here? Yeah, I'm telling you, literally every night I fall asleep to my massage. And by the way, we didn't plan this commercial that she just did for me. No. So thank you. This is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we met.
It's a real life testimonial.
And so then, more context. So then we show up. My son Everson wants to do flag football. We show up at this practice, and you're there.
Yeah.
And we just, the universe brought our boys together to play football with each other. And that first year, I forget, was it the Bears?
Jets.
The Jets. No, but it wasn't the Jets the first year.
No, Steelers.
It was Steelers.
Oh, that's right. The Steelers. Yeah.
It was the Steelers. And then that coach went off and did different things. And then
I took over the team.
Yeah. And the boys were like, we want to keep doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And the parents were like, JD, will you take over? I'm like, no, I don't need the stress in my life right now. Were you crazy? And of course I took over.
And now it's taken over your life.
And now it's taken over my life.
Yeah.
And what's funny is it's like, and I told this to somebody at the game the other day, it's like the only hour of my life where I'm not like stressing about business and entrepreneurship and cash flow is the hour that I am on the field with the boys. So it's actually the opposite, even though it is stressful calling plays because the game kind of relies on how I'm calling the game because they don't. It's like that 1 hour where I forget about everything.
Because your brain gets so focused in on this thing that all the other tabs have to close.
Right.
So all the other tabs that have been like running and like making the like server, slow down, they all close because they are present with the boys. And I will say this, I feel like it's been really cool to watch your growth as a coach and as a human being, like over the years. I see you out there, JD, in those moments when you would have maybe previously like thrown your hat on the floor on the field or something. I see you take a breath.
Yeah.
I see you take the pause. I see you like shift gears and like talk to the boys about, keeping their spirits up and like it's a game. We're here to help, and life lessons along the way.
Oh my gosh, life lessons. And I'm working on myself. I'm glad that you're noticing because
I notice.
I would a little bit, as each season has gone on, I'll react less openly because if I react too badly, it affects them. Even though I coach them up immediately after, I'll react. I'll say, okay, cool. This is a learning moment. Next time, just go this way or do this.
Yeah.
But if the reaction's too much, I need to watch that. Yeah. So I've been watching.
Yes, no, and I see it. And at the end of the day, that's what matters most to me. It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's not like, and we'll get into this.
Yes.
This is part of my backstory, right? Is my relationship with perfectionism. And it's like, it's progress and it's growth and it's like a willingness to be like,
Yeah, exactly. So I can't wait to dig into this. All right. So speaking of which, let's dig into your backstory a little bit.
Yeah.
So before Dr. Cassidy was a doctor, when let's go back to where were you born and raised? What's your childhood like?
Yeah. So San Diego, born and raised.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I grew up in Chula Vista and Bonita. So I was born in Chula Vista and then, more grew up in Bonita area. And so my parents, my dad, he is from the Midwest and he grew up really poor. His dad was a butcher and mom was home. And, he had all brothers and it was beautiful in the sense of family. And from how he describes it, it was also really intense.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stress around money. The way that he pulled himself out of that and found safety and security was through education. And but it was a pretty pressured situation, right? Like him and his brothers were really competitive. Like that's how they pushed each other. Was like how they, fought and how they competed and who was going to be the best. And
typical.
Yeah. And also, his so much love, but there was a lot of intensity, and the way he, pulled himself out and like found his security was through education. And so he's retired now. He was a public defender. He went to law school and he was a public defender and defended kids who committed crimes.
Wow.
And it was, and yeah, and just, but always a really, really intense guy. Like, the furrowed eyebrows, just like really hyper focused, and loved his job. Like, I mean, going to like his retirement party and hearing other people share stories about the work that he did, like he made a huge impact in kids' lives.
Wow.
And so my mom, she's Hispanic, and also they met on opposite sides of the courtroom, so also a public defender.
Oh, really?
And she ended up being, and now she's a judge, right? So now she's got like all this power. In also, so he was in delinquency court, so kids who committed crimes, and she was in defending them and supporting them and, helping get them back on the right track. And my mom is dependency court, so kids who were abused. And she defended the kids. And now she's a judge who makes huge decisions about, these kids' lives too.
Wow.
And so, for her though, as a Hispanic woman, going to college, choosing to go to law school, showing up in spaces that were primarily white men.
Yep.
She had to be perfect. So there was no room for mistakes, right? It's like, if I'm going to get in, and she did it, right? Like, she's got all this power now, but to get to that place, there was a lot of, kind of like shape shifting, having to like, be perfect, fit in, to have a voice, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so they met in court, like I think on opposite sides. And my dad always says, like, she wasn't in dependency court at the time. So he walked out, and she had her finger up to this like, big guy who was like, there for some crime he committed. And she was like, she was wagging her finger in his face, and he was just like nodding his head. And my mom always says she remembers my dad walked by, and he kind of had the like hippie long hair, and she was just like, they both just like noticed each other. And at the time, my dad, he had been married previously. He was divorced. And my mom, she's, my that side of the family, Catholic, and they got together, and it was, it was tough there at first. Yeah. My grandma was just like, who is this white divorced guy? And he was 10 years older than her too. So there's like this big age gap, but they fell in love. And my dad had always wanted to be a dad. And in his first marriage, they had tried, and they weren't able to have any children. And, it ended up being okay, because the marriage ended up not working out. But he was really excited to become a dad.
Wow.
And there's some funny stories in the family, some family secrets that, around, like, because my mom, when they got married, and what's funny is my husband, David, he's the one that did the math for me. They got married in February, and I was born in August. And he was like, babe, so she was pregnant. And I was like, what? I was like, no. And I was like, wait. He's like, do the math. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I come to my mom, and I'm like in high school, because Dave and I met in high school. And I'm like, Mom. And she was like, yeah, we had to push the date up a little bit. And my dad was like, I planned that all. He's like, I knew she was the one. He wanted to be a father. And he, I don't know. I was like, but and he's like, I kept a calendar of when she was ovulating.
He did?
Yeah.
Oh
and my mom, and he said that he told my mom, like, we'll get pregnant. And she said, mm-hmm. And then that's what happened.
Oh my gosh. And so it wasn't until high school that you realized?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't do the math. I mean, I don't think I knew the year they got married, so I think I just like.
And so you and Dave met in high school?
We met in high school.
No way.
But let me back up. I'll get there.
Yeah, I'm not going to get ahead.
Let me back up, because so they have me. I'm their first. And so you've got these two folks who, in their own upbringing, childhood, and like, adult experiences, there was a lot of pressure, for education, to be perfect, to get good grades, to, I think also, for my mom, there was a lot of like, hold in your feelings, right? You have to just kind of be like all put together all the time. Like,
can't show any weakness.
And for my dad too. And, I think that what that translated into was, a kind of pressure cooker situation where me as a little one kind of absorbed and observed that in order to belong here, which is what all kids do, right? Like you come into this world, you're so vulnerable. You're looking around and you're like, attachment is the most important thing for my survival. Is to keep these people that are here to take care of, that like provide literally everything for me, food, shelter, safety, is to figure out how do I keep them close? Like that's attachment. You know, and unfortunately in some situations, right, which both my parents saw every day, right? Like that's, you know, there's abuse, and that's really, really scary and really awful and really confusing and really traumatic for children. You know, and then I think there's scenarios like mine, like two really wonderful parents who had really all the best intentions and were out there actually like saving children, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But because of their own childhood experiences and trauma, and at the time, you know, therapy wasn't like, there was a lot of stigma around it. You don't go and like ask someone else to get help, you know, to kind of process some of those experiences once you become a parent and you realize like, oh wow, this is like triggering a lot of stuff for me, you know? But it did. And it was, you know, so me as a little kid, just like we all do as little kids, I'm looking to the caretakers and I'm like, what do I need to do to belong in this system, right? To stay attached and close to you. And what I learned was that I needed to be a good girl, you know, be a good girl, behave, keep my feelings kind of in check. And I really needed to like perform, when it came to school. And, you know, and it initially came easy, you know, I was able to, based off of our like American academic system, like I was able to perform based off of what the system was requiring of me, you know, for a period of time. And then what I also experienced was I would perform, and I got a lot of positive reinforcement from that. It was like a lot of pride. And my dad, and he's still this way, like he's so proud of me, right? And so he tells everybody everything that I do that has been an accomplishment, and that's beautiful. Some kids don't get any of that kind of encouragement and support, right? And yet the message that I got from that was like, you got to keep this up to like to give him something to be proud about, you know? And it was not sustainable or realistic, because perfect isn't possible.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
And then, but what it also though created was a situation where it wasn't because of what internally was motivating me. It was this like, I needed to do this to please those around me, right? To make other people happy. And you know, and for my mom, you know, in her context, she needed to be perfect. And how that translated into home though is there was never any apologizing. Like, you know, like if she as I apologize to my kids every day because I'm an imperfect human and I lose my shit and I like get impatient, or I just say something that I'm like, that's not how I meant. Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, like, and literally now, like they will expect it. The other day, like I yelled at Everson, you know, he like wanted a popsicle and I was like, dude, no, like, and he's lost his mind. And I was like, it gets harder than this, you know? And I just saw his like little face drop and he walked, but you know, before he walked away, he looked at me and he was like, you're going to be saying the S word to me soon. And I'm like, you know, I'm like, what? And he's like, you're going to be saying sorry. And like, he walks away. And the thing is like, I did come back and apologize. I was like, you still don't get a popsicle. And like, yet telling you that it gets harder than this, that's actually the part of me that is afraid if you let your emotions, if you feel your things and you let it out, that the world is going to crush you and hurt you. And like, and yeah, in some situations, like the world isn't going to create space for that. But that doesn't mean that with me in our home, that you can't feel safe enough to let out your feelings and like name your feelings and learn how to regulate your feelings so that when you're out in the world and other relationships, like you like know how to handle those things, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there was never any apologizing. And And I think that
for apologizing, you mean like if they were hard on you or disciplining you or
made a mistake,
yeah.
like just made a mistake as humans do, right? Like, like lost their cool in a way that was scary or overwhelming, right? And that like wasn't called for, but like they got triggered and they got reactive and like which I do every day, like as a human being. And just to come back and to be like, hey, like, you know what, I'm sorry. That's not how I wanted to show up for you in that moment, right? Yeah. And so, I think that like I definitely like put that my mom on a pedestal too. And she worked so hard and I never saw her rest. I never saw her slow down, it felt like. And I think that, and that's because she didn't feel like she could. When you look at the context, it makes a lot of sense. Like to survive in the environments that she was trying to show up in and like gain some power within, right? For really incredible change, there was no space for slowing down and rest. And so I adopted that, it was just, and my parents' message to me and like I think I really understand where they were coming from now. And it's a beautiful message. Like their message was work hard and do your best. But how I translated that as a child who was trying to make sense of the world around me and what I was observing it was like work hard and never stop and be the best.
And be the best. Yeah.
And that is not like sustainable for any human being. Right. And so once I got into high school and college and school
and do you have brothers and sisters?
I have 2 younger brothers.
Two young, okay.
Yeah. So I was the oldest. And once I got into high school and college and like things started to get harder, like school started to get harder for me. Right. And like all of a sudden also like I wanted to have a social life. And it got to the point where my anxiety was so bad. My performance anxiety was so bad. In college, I went to the doctor and I was like, I'm not sleeping. Like I'm having, panic attacks over like A minuses, like, and I was, I was like and the doctor at the time was like, oh, here's a prescription for Xanax.
Yeah, of course.
And I was like, okay, I guess this is what I do and what I take. And, and Xanax.
And this was in college.
This was in college. Yeah. And so, I was pre-med, at the time. So my parents and again, I think the kind of thought that I had, they were always like, you're going to make a great lawyer. You're going to make a great lawyer. You're going to make a great lawyer. And I was like, I don't think I want to be a lawyer, but what else would be acceptable? And it was, I think, to be a doctor. It's like, be a doctor, be a lawyer. So I was like, okay, I had volunteered at a couple of different, Polinsky Children's Center, which is here in San Diego. It's a shelter for kids who are abused, and my mom was connected. And so I worked there for a bit, and I was pre-med, but then I was doing this volunteer work. And what I saw was some of the social workers that were working with these kids and the impact that they were having and how ill-equipped I felt in supporting these kids who were just going through the most unimaginable traumatic scenarios. And I was like, so I was pre-med and so I was doing that work. And at the same time, I was also doing some like pre-med, internships. And I remember being like, I was inside the room for a cesarean of like triplets, like it was like part of this internship. You got to be witness to these like procedures. And I thought I was going to pass out. But then afterwards, I got to go in and talk to the parents. So I'm like, and I loved that, just like getting a chance to talk about that experience for them and like hear kind of the emotions that they were going through in that moment. And so, I had this like collection of experiences of seeing social workers and, getting to talk to parents postpartum. And I was like, I don't think the medicine route is the way I want to go here. I think that I'm really interested now more so in like psychology and family work. And so I shifted gears at that point in time, and switched over to psychology as my major. And I think that also there was something really empowering for me in that moment to be like, I think I'm going to go a different route than what you guys kind of expected from me, what my family expected from me. And because like and my parents were so connected here in San Diego in the legal world, right? I had to all of a sudden like make my own connections. And there was this kind of differentiation that happened in that space.
How did they feel when you reverted to therapist?
They were supportive. Like the thing about my parents is like all of their stuff is like it how it showed up in these kind of micro moments as parents was like, yeah, intense. And they felt pressure to go a certain path and to have perfect grades and to be a good girl that like, didn't make any mistakes and didn't like, ruffle any feathers. But at the same time, like they were so supportive and like they're the love and the love was so strong and the safety that was like in that love, was so strong that, I did feel like I had enough courage to say, hey, I'm going to do something different. And, I think at that point in time too, like I had moved out and there was just like, yeah, I go through that like reckoning of like, who am I outside of my family? Now I will say that the perfectionism, the like need for being good and like, and also being like still kind of externally motivated was still there.
Of course.
I did like, thank goodness they were supportive because I think that if they weren't, I don't, that would have been really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, and I should mention Dave in all of this. Yeah. So him and I.
Oh yeah, Dave.
Yeah, that guy.
Oh yeah, that guy. The arm candy.
Yeah, he's totally my arm candy. So we met in high school. Yeah. So
wow.
I was a freshman.
What high school did you go to?
I went to uni, which is now Cathedral.
Yeah.
So we're both born and raised here. And I was a freshman and, I was smart, and so I was in some of these advanced classes and he was not in advanced classes.
Yeah.
So because I was in advanced classes, like and he was a year older than me, we were in some of the similar classes with each other. And we first took chemistry together and we had chemistry. And so we started dating when we were like 16.
Wow.
So super young.
Oh my gosh.
And then, he went off to college and he went to Arizona and I was still in high school. And so we did distance for the year. And then it's funny because then he came back because he was like, that was really hard and we wanted to like be closer. And I was like, I think I need though to go have my own experience. So then I went to college up in LA while he was here at USD. And so we did distance while I was in college. And it was good though, right? Because like I joined a sorority, like I made new friends, like I did my own thing up there. This is the point in time when I'm like, pre-med and then figuring out I don't want to do that. And just having that space was good for both of us.
Was it hard at all? Like, was he jealous at all? Like, what are you doing in the sorority? Is there another party?
Yeah. I mean, he would get jealous at times and I would get jealous at times, and we'd break up and get back together a week later and, we made it work, I knew from the beginning, he was so much more mature than all the other guys. Like I'd look around and there was just no one that compared to like his, so he went to USD. He worked at Caldera Spas and he paid his way through, his parents could have definitely paid for his college, but he was like, no, he's just so really, really strives for that like independence and like not wanting to ask anyone for help. And like, that's his own thing, right? You could have him on the podcast and there's context around all that, right? Like he didn't want to ask for any financial help. And so he wanted to pave his own way. And so, he was working at Caldera Spas and, selling jacuzzis and paid his way through USD, which is like not a cheap tuition.
No.
And he just worked. Like he didn't party. He didn't do, and sometimes we look back and I'm like, I think he definitely grew up too fast. Right. When I look at his own family system and like, he should have been able to, step back and like be a kid more,
Right. Yeah.
But so I noticed like he grew up so fast in ways he shouldn't have. But like as a 16-year-old, I was like, wow, this guy's really mature and like has his job and like paying his way through college and just, and a really good head on his shoulders. And also he probably shouldn't have had to have grown up as fast as he did.
Right.
But he, and then, so he paid his way through that. he then went and interned for a property manager. And then eventually, when that person was going to retire, he bought that business from him. And now he owns his own business.
Yeah, he's been doing it ever since, right?
Yeah, doing it ever since. Yeah. And so so after I graduated college, at this time, I think I eventually stopped taking Xanax because I was like,
oh yeah, go back to that real quick.
This is addicting.
So when you started taking it, was that the only thing that they prescribed to you? Did they give you other stuff?
Nope, it was just Xanax.
And you're like, okay, cool. Did you tell your parents?
Yeah, told my parents. My mom was like, oh yeah, I've been on that.
Oh really?
Yeah. It's like, and I think that we have to put it in context for the time, right? It's like, and also, just what the doctor knew and what doctors were doing at the time. Like Xanax was being prescribed.
It's, like nothing.
And right, like nothing.
And you were at 19, 20?
Yeah. And so, it definitely chilled me out, right? But it was this cycle of like, I was, killing myself during the day with school, stressing, not learning. And I was taking psychology classes, right? But they're just like the Psych 101 classes. I'm not like learning yet how to, what to do with my feelings and how to process my own context and in family, the historical family trauma and the generational legacies. Like I'm not doing any of that work. I'm just learning about these things. So it's like this vicious cycle of stress, produce. Oh my gosh, my nervous system is a wreck. Take a Xanax. Now I'm going to get some sleep.
And how often would you take one? Every night? Would you take one?
Yeah, it was like every night.
Every night
for months, but then it is addicting, and it got to, and here's the thing, is like medication, I think, can really support getting people's head above water. This medication for me and what I really needed was not the right fit. Right. Because then it was addicting. It was starting to not work anymore because my body was getting used to it.
Right.
And it's like, do I take a higher dose? Like, and I'm not, and it's a cycle. Like there's nothing in there where I'm able to kind of step in and say like, oh my gosh, what's actually happening for me here, like emotionally and like underneath all of this. It was just a cycle. And it was actually Dave who was like, I don't think this is helping. I don't think this is working. Like, the last time I was here, you were taking this dose and now you need more to sleep, just to sleep, like.
And you're in your young 20s or.
Yeah. But the doctor prescribed it and I'm like, this is.
You have no idea how many people have been on the podcast that this exact story of like in 19, 20, 21 that are then on it for 20 more years. And
here's the thing is like, I was a very responsible, like 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old. Like, when we were going out, like I would be the designated driver, right? Like substances were not something that I was like, spending a lot of time playing around with.
Yeah.
And got to get those good grades and got to produce and perform. But this one, it was so not the right fit. And so Dave called me out on it, and I was like, yeah, no, I think you're right. And so I stopped, and then my sleep was a mess again, which was so hard. But eventually, I think eventually.
Did you go to the doctor and say, hey, do you have anything else that's better? Or?
Yeah, I went to the doctor. I think they gave me some like sleep hygiene, like, like here's some ways to like get better sleep.
Yeah.
Like, without.
What about, did he give you sleeping pills?
No sleeping pills.
That's,
like
I'm
that.
surprised.
Yeah. Thank goodness. I mean, I think at that point I came in and said for myself, I was like, I don't think that it's actually like a sleep rhythm thing that it's actually something that like has to do with my anxiety and like my stress and because I don't think that would have been a good fit for me at the time either. And so I had to kind of sit in the discomfort of the pain instead of taking something that was just like, numbing me and making me, fall asleep immediately. And so so I graduated.
How'd you get through that? Like, because most people, they can't do it.
Yeah, I think, I think that having the support from Dave, I think like I got a dog, actually. That's a good piece of kind of name in here. I got a dog that like really, there's something about getting a dog that like was like, whoa, there's like more to life than just getting good
striving
grades and striving and performing,
grinding.
and he needed me, and so I'd come home and there was just something so, and I think that like children have this way of like, I definitely know for me having kids brought up a lot, but it was like this, all of a sudden there's like more to life, there was like more meaning to life. And I'd sleep with him. It was kind of like a therapy dog, I slept with him in bed. And like, I remember Dave grew up in a house where like dogs don't come to the bed. I remember the first time I like brought the dog in bed. He's like, what is that animal doing in the bed? And I was like, he helps. And he's like, okay, like whatever. Like, and what's funny now is that dog, he just passed away this past summer.
Aww.
He became Dave's like soulmate.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
If he wasn't in bed with us, Dave was like going to find him and bringing him in bed, right? Like they became soulmates. But at the time he was like, what is this animal doing in bed? I'm like, it's helping, and
wow.
And I really do think that was a big piece of it. But I was still struggling. Like I was still, like I graduated summa cum laude, like top of my class. Like I, and then I decided to go and get my master's. But, I think what also kind of supported me at that time, was, the separation from my family and beginning to like through the classes I was taking, it was like, and especially once I got into the, graduate program and those classes, it was like this deep dive into my own personal work, right? Like now I'm actually learning how to become a therapist. And so there was this, every single class is like asking us to also reflect on these things for ourselves and started to look at, kind of the generational legacy of pressure and performance and anxiety between both of my families, and then just kind of being able to have a lot of compassion for myself and my parents through that context, because I think context always leads to compassion. Like, can you imagine if our world was able to, and if humans across the world were able to pause and had access to context and were curious enough to want to know about others' context, like just how much more compassion and thus peace and thus it would be life changing.
Oh, it's why why I designed this or launched this podcast, because I'm digging into people's backstories so other people can listen to these backstories. Oh, I'm not the only one who had this or the rough going, or like
even just to be like, wow, I really disagree with this person. And then to hear someone's context, it's just like, you probably still will disagree. And maybe then though, we can actually start having conversations, right? Or like, I just think there's a huge bridge that comes when we get curious. And
self-awareness is literally everything. Self-awareness is everything. And it's interesting. So you're basically your own client.
Oh my gosh.
To start, because you can't help anybody.
No.
Unless you're digging into your own and figuring yourself out, right?
Yeah. And so in the program, it's really encouraged. And actually to get licensed, it's really encouraged to do your own therapy. So you have to get a certain number of hours, like thousands of hours, before you can get licensed of like clinical work and training. But you get like it gets like double counted, or at least it did when I was getting licensed. If you are seeing your own therapist, if you do your own therapy, you can count those hours and they count as like double or triple. So like they were like really encouraging us to do our own work.
That's great.
And thank goodness, right? And so I did. I started therapy, and it was like just life changing, right? Like just to really take time. Like I spent so much time, the way it's been described to me, and this really resonates, I spent so much time walking around like a balloon, it's like pinched at my neck, where like everything was just operating in my brain, right? It was just all about like, it was ruminating, stressing, like, just how can I get this right? How can I perform? How can I be perfect at this? Because that's what's going to keep me safe and belong, and what do others need from me? And then therapy was like unpinching the balloon and just all of a sudden like actually dropping into my body, which I had spent so much time not in, right? Which is, and so dropping into my body and like beginning to also like through that recognize like all the other parts of myself. So the people pleaser part of me, the perfectionist part of me, the part of me that, had big feelings like anger, right? And like but didn't feel like those things were okay to express, or didn't know what to do with them when they did show up. Really just, core human emotions that we all have, right? But that I had kind of learned to protect others from seeing that I had, and, protect myself from experiencing, and with the armor, which was perfectionism. Like perfectionism is anxiety.
Right.
It's just anxiety, like with the perfect outfit and like fancy shoes and like all of the accolades, right? That's like, here's my armor. Because if I'm perfect, then you won't see the underneath.
Yeah.
I'm actually scared. I'm actually overwhelmed. I actually don't know if I know everything. I actually make mistakes, right? And like all that vulnerability felt too risky to let others see. And then I became a parent. Right. So like I went to therapy, and like I did a lot of work there, and like that was, that was really important work, but it wasn't. So, okay. So Dave and I, after college, we like took a year, we moved in with each other. He proposed, we got married. I'd always wanted to be a mom. And Dave just says, he was like, I was just on your train. He's like, I didn't even know that's the direction we were headed. But he was like, I love this girl. And so like, what, and that created actually his own issues and our own issues. Right. So, I really wanted to be a mom. It took a little while. We did have some fertility challenges in the beginning, and that was like, that was really, really rough. But then I got pregnant, and
how many years did it take? Years?
No, it just took a few months, but like,
oh, that's it.
Yeah. But like but I wasn't having a period. I wasn't ovulating. And so like, I wasn't sure, cause I've been on birth control. I got off birth control.
Gotcha.
And it was we weren't sure what was going on with my body. And again, not super long, but for somebody who's like, I know how to make things happen. If I study hard enough, if I work hard enough, then I get the thing that I want, right? Like I accomplish. And so fertility brought that up, like definitely triggered that for me. Wow. So I was like, wait, like this is something I can't seem to control. And like, this is something that I want. And like, how do I control this scenario? And then pregnancy was the same thing, and birth, right? It was, I brought, because what it did is it triggered all that stuff. So like I was underneath, I was afraid because I had never done this before. I had never been pregnant before. I had never given birth before. I had never been a parent before. And how I had typically coped when things inside felt scary or overwhelming or uncertain was I had armored up, right? With like, with performance, with perfectionism, with, right? Like just working really, really hard. Work hard, do your best, right?
Yeah.
Work hard, never stop, and be the best, know? And so I translated that into pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, because I was like, with my armor, right? I'm going to have the perfect birth plan, right? Like I am going, and what that translated to was like a really rigid birth plan. Like this is how birth is going to go.
Wow.
Right. And I hired a doula that like aligned with that, right? It's like no C-section, no medication, right? This is my first job as a parent, and I'm going to be the best at it. I'm going to give my daughter the quote unquote best. And that's what I thought was going to be the best, right?
Yeah.
And I have very different views now, but that's what I went in with that armor. And, it was like, I'm going to have the perfect registry list. We're going to spend way too much money on all these perfect products that are going to make, it was just all the armor, right? It was spending money. It was really rigid plans. It was like even as I'm talking about, I can feel my body just like tightening and clenching.
Wow.
And like,
and I've heard this before.
Yeah. And like, that is not the energy that I want to bring into a birth, right? But like, that's what I did. And that just came from the perfectionism of just the armor. The armor that I think that we all carry. And the thing is like, the armor isn't the enemy here. Like, right? Like there are certain ways in which that now I've learned, like that perfectionist part of me, right? Like is actually also the part of me that, because it is anxiety, right?
Right.
It's that part of me that's like, there's this thing coming up that's really important to you. And like, it's the part of me that's like, oh, I'm going to wake up at this time so that I'm here to record this podcast on time, right? It's the part of me that like helps me prepare before an interview or like study for a test, right? But sometimes it surpasses its level of helpfulness, right? It's not the enemy. It's just a part of me.
Yeah.
But it was a part of me that had been in the driver's seat for a really, really long time. And so
on the first birth, how did everything change?
Well, shit hit the fan, in the sense that like she was not, I pushed for like 2.5 hours. She was not coming out that way. I had gotten an epidural, and like that already felt like, one check against me, like one failure already. Because I had been in labor for so long.
Right. Yeah.
Then I was pushing for 2.5 hours. She wasn't coming out that way. I was exhausted. Like I had not slept for like over 24 hours. And the doctor was like, we can do forceps, we can do, right, or we could do a C-section. And I remember, the doula that and again, this isn't I love doulas, but like I hired a doula that aligned with like my views of like no C-section. And she was like, I've never had a C-section. Like all my births always,
right,
lead into a vaginal birth. And so her face, and this ended up being the part that was like the most traumatic for me, was when I said, okay, fine. Like, let's just like, I couldn't even open my eyes. I'm like, just take her out. I, looked over at the doula, and like the shame I felt just from like her facial expression that like, I had ruined her like perfect, like perfect streak of never having a C-section. It was her. And then she left, she didn't stay. Right. And so like, it was because that comes back to like, think about the child.
Did she leave because she was disgusted, or isn't she supposed to stick around?
I don't know. I think she just felt like she didn't know she'd never been into a C-section. So like, she didn't know what to do. So she left. Right. Like, but like that moment, what I ended up being able to connect with later on when I went to therapy, and did some, because it ended up being a very traumatic birth for me. Right. Like I couldn't open my eyes. When they took Riley out, Dave was like, she's here. And I turned my face away from her. I felt so much shame. I was so exhausted. I turned my face away from her. And that moment of turning away from her and not being able to open my eyes, and like hearing Dave's voice, which sounded really scared, like, Cassidy, open your eyes. Are you like, she's here? And I couldn't even look at her. And the doula's face, those two memories were like seared in my brain and like very traumatic for me. And when I did therapy later on, what I was able to connect to is like in that moment, like when you're little, that's the biggest fear you have, is to see that your parent is like disowning you or like disappointed in you and turns away from you. Because when you're a child, all you need is their support for survival.
Right.
I'd hired this person to help me survive this thing I was actually really scared about, to support me. And she looked ashamed and she turned away. And then when my child, my first moment in meeting her came out, I turned away. And so those two experiences from that birth were very traumatizing for me. Like it became the like, the postpartum, like that was the first, those were huge risk factors, right? So I ended up experiencing, really intense postpartum anxiety. I could not sleep. Speaking of sleep, I would stay, like when she'd wake up, I was up. When she was asleep, I was watching her. Like it was like, I could not sleep.
Wow. I
was having, distressing thoughts of bad things happening to her. Like really, and this is postpartum anxiety.
Yes.
And the thing about anxiety postpartum is that actually all parents are more at risk for it, right? Like, again, back to our ancestors who survived were the ones who were on high alert when they had a very like vulnerable newborn. And so the postpartum brain, they've done research, actually looks more like somebody's brain who has maybe diagnosed OCD, because we're just on more high alert. It's how we keep our young alive, right? And so everybody can have some increased anxiety or like, distressing, intrusive thoughts that pop up and actually still be able to function. But for me, it was impacting functioning. And then Dave, who like didn't even like he didn't even really consent to becoming a parent, right? I was like, this is happening. Like, I want to be a mom. Like I just really took charge and all of that. And he was just like along for the ride and like it did not feel connected during the pregnancy. It was happening in my body. I think a lot of my like need for control took him away from his opportunity to be able to like connect to being a dad and being a parent. My anxiety made the control that came with anxiety like really pushed him out too. And he also has like a predisposition to depression.
Right.
He had experienced depression before. And so now, there was not a ton of research at the time around postpartum depression in dads, but it is a thing. And it makes so much sense when you think about it. They're also like going through a huge identity shift. They're also potentially not sleeping, right? Like their marriage has changed. Like they're like that. They're feeling the pressure to provide, right? Like there was so much, he felt a lot of pressure. He felt like he wasn't able to connect with me, right? Or with the baby. And he experienced postpartum depression.
Wow.
So now we have two parents who are really, really struggling. So
and there's a part of the man that when the baby arrives, like he's no longer the focus of you.
Oh my
right?
gosh. And
that a thing?
And we totally, and like and Dave and I have done a lot of work around this in our own couples work. Like there had been, so Dave, I said earlier, like Dave really grew up really fast and his story is his. I don't want to speak for him, but between the two of us, I had been kind of like the first person where he felt like he could be vulnerable with, and then he became pretty kind of reliant on me to like be that source of like connection and intimacy, and not just intimacy from like a sex perspective, like intimacy just from like a human to human perspective of like I can show up as my full self and like you see all of me and you still love me and you're not like going anywhere, right? Like, and I really didn't go anywhere from like 16. So like there was this deep sense of like you're my person and now I feel so safe, right? And then a child came and with my anxiety, my whole focus shifted, and like to a very extreme degree where he was getting like none of my affection and attention. And that made him feel like really hopeless and really shitty. And then as he was withdrawing with his depression, I felt even more so like this is all on me, right? And the resentment, and it was this really vicious cycle. So at the time, I had graduated with my master's, and I took some time off with the baby, and then I ended up, we ended up eventually going to therapy, individual for both of us, couples for the two of us, and that was life-changing, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I was able to. It really was becoming a parent that brought forth like all of these parts of me that I had been protecting myself and armored up against for so long. And it's because these little humans are like these little, like, they come out and they're like these like little representations of like the parts of us that we may have learned to shut down, right? Like they don't come into the world and like try to please others and like not have, like they just come out wailing with all of their needs and all of their desires. And like those were all the parts of me that I had learned to like basically armor up against, right? And like not show anybody. But then I realized that I didn't necessarily know how I wanted to respond to it differently than what I had experienced. I had no idea how to apologize, like, because I was really like, apologizing was really not comfortable for me. Like saying sorry meant that like I wasn't perfect. It meant that I had made mistakes, and like, how do I do this differently? So I wanted to break the cycle. There were a lot of cycles going on, right? Like generational cycles between my husband and I wanted to shift things. And I was a marriage and family therapist at the time, can't be the therapist for my own relationship, which is appropriate. I should not be. Like, I need support too. That was part of the work. I think, part of that people pleasing part of me, part of all of these parts of me allow me to connect with people, be really attuned to other people's needs, what they're feeling, right? Like it all contributed to helping me be a really great therapist. And I needed to have a space too where I could work on my stuff. Also get the experience of what it's like to be on the other side of the chair, the other side of the couch, and have that support for myself. I get to also be somebody who can fall apart sometimes,
Yeah.
And that was a really important step in my own work. So we went to therapy. We got better. I did EMDR therapy to process my traumatic birth.
What's that?
So it's an evidence-based approach to treating trauma that, you know how when you break a bone, the doctor just basically says, I'm going to make it so that you can't move the arm and your body's going to literally know how to fix this. Our brain is always leaning towards and wanting to heal. But, life keeps happening. We keep experiencing big T traumas or little paper cut traumas, and the brain gets overwhelmed with how to process all of these experiences. So EMDR basically helps activate the body's natural mechanism towards healing in the brain. It's really about storage, how the brain stores memories. So it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's not hypnosis. The eye movement piece sounds like that. It's not hypnosis. It's a evidence-based approach to treating trauma. They first discovered it in treating veterans and PTSD from war trauma. And now they use it for all sorts of presenting issues. But I did that for processing my birth trauma. And it was it's such a potent approach. What you could process in maybe 3 years of talk therapy, you could work through in 3 months of EMDR.
Wow.
So it's super effective. And I did that. I ended up getting trained in that as well, because I was I got to have this tool in my tool belt for my clients. And then I went back to get my PhD and did my dissertation and all my research on postpartum depression in dads and the impact that the family system can have on postpartum when it comes to both parents who are struggling, and made a lot of meaning around the experience and being able to support other parents. And now, so let me share a little bit more around the work stuff. So I got my PhD. In that, so during that program, I gave birth to Everson while I was getting my PhD. I was commuting up to Loma Linda, so I was driving 2.5 hours there, 2.5 hours back, pregnant, and then postpartum. But I had so much more support at the time. It was still cuckoo time. Dave and I still look back and we're how did we do that? But we had a lot of support. Both our families are in San Diego, and we made that happen. And Everson's number 2, right? He's number 2. We did have a pregnancy loss between Riley, our oldest, and Everson, and that was really hard too.
Yeah.
But what I did differently with this program, going back to school to get my PhD, I wrote myself a letter actually before I started, and the letter to myself was permission to pause, permission to stop, permission to do it slowly, permission to at the end of the day, the values that I wanted to prioritize were presence. And that meant presence with my kids. And that also meant presence with myself, right? With this other thing that was important to me, that I could show them that they could, that they could be parents that have interests outside of parenting, but presence. And in order for me to have presence, things had to move slow, and I didn't always read all the things I was supposed to read for the homework, right? I wasn't always fully prepared. But then I'd remind myself in those moments where I was wait, this isn't comfortable. I'm not used to not being so overly prepared for everything. I was but remember yesterday you made a choice, and you consciously chose with your value in mind of presence with Riley, and then Everson when he was born. And then there'd be times when I was at school and I'd get videos of them saying a word, and I was then I'd start to feel guilt around that. And, guilt is a funny human emotion. We're all wired for it.
Right.
I love guilt. Guilt pops up and is oh, you're doing something out of alignment with your values. But guilt doesn't always get it right. Guilt's just reminding me that I value presence with them. And then I get to reclaim the driver's seat and remind guilt, yeah, thank you. I know. And also, the more that I am able to be present with myself and these other things that are important to me outside of motherhood, the more that then when I am with them, like I can be present with them, because this part of me is important too. So I'm actually going to like say thank you, guilt, but I am a present mom. I'm going to be there tomorrow. I've got a full day with them, and I know that I can make choices to allow me to be present with them too. But right now, I want to be here, all here right now with myself and this other goal that I have, right? This other thing that's important to me too. So there was just this huge shift in how I related to schoolwork, to performance, to goals, it was so much more internally driven, value driven. It was slower paced. It was just such a different experience.
And what sparked the switch of that? Like, was it therapy?
It was therapy. And it was wanting to change things for my kids. It was like wanting to do things, wanting to break the cycle and that legacy for them too.
And then, so the second birth with Everson, was there less planning? Was there less this? Give it to me. What was the difference?
The birth plan, coming back to values, the birth plan was basically a list of values that I identified that I wanted to go into the birth holding in mind. And in moments where there were decisions that had to be made, I could come back to those values. And the values that I really chose to prioritize were connection, presence, and safety. And like with each decision, because I did try to have a vaginal birth after the cesarean, they call it a VBAC. And there were points in time where the doctor came in and at one point he said like, it's not really progressing. And, we could keep going or we could, and I was like, you know what? I want to be awake this time. Like I want to have energy this time when the baby comes. Like I want to be able to see him and so let's do the C-section, right? So then we had another C-section. It was such a reparative experience. My eyes were wide open. He lowered the curtain when he was pulling him out so I could see him. We did what they call like pseudo skin to skin, where they brought him up to my cheek. He was like licking my cheek, like he's just like rooting and just like, I will never forget that moment. And what also happened in all of this is, my daughter, as she's gotten older, my oldest, where I had that experience where I turned away from her, right? Like I've been able to share with her like the story, the birth story, and like what I was going through and what I was fighting within myself. And just, and now, gosh, like that, she's 12 now and she like almost every night still wants to come in and snuggle with me and talk to me. And it's like, I had the rest of my life to not turn away from her, to turn towards her,
And it must have been kind of therapeutic and healing to admit this to a child that actually had no idea and never would.
100%. And even now, like when I was parenting her when she was a toddler, I watched back at videos and I did a lot of trying to micromanage her behavior, especially when we were around other people, like wanting her to like behave in a way that's like not characteristic of a toddler, right? Like they're just like, it's developmentally appropriate for a toddler to push on boundaries, to like let their feelings out. And I did kind of micromanage it a lot. And now even I'll come to her when like we have a 3-year-old now, our youngest June. And when I'm parenting June in a way that still holds boundaries, but like validates her feelings, like lets her be a human being with feelings, and then helps her like figure out what the name for that feeling is, right? Like she's losing it. And I'm like, you're so angry right now. You're angry. You really wanted that cookie. Oh, that's so hard. I know. Like I love cookies too. We're still not going to have the cookie right now, but I'm here. Do you want a hug? Like just to be present and validate. And it's like to name the feelings and like, right? Like you still, like I still can hold boundaries because that's my job, is to keep you safe. And I can't take away the hard, but I can take away the feelings of being alone in the hard, and like I can help give you language for the feelings you're having. But then afterwards, I'll turn to my oldest, Riley, and I'll say, you know what? You might not remember these moments because they're probably before you have like some tangible memories. Yeah. But your body might remember. Right. Because my oldest, she's got a people-pleasing perfectionist streak, right? And I'll tell her like, and this is my reparative work, right? Like when you were little, I didn't do it like this, and we watch videos and I share with her, I wish I would have done this a little bit differently, and I'm sorry. Like just think, I want every listener to think right now, like what would it feel like if your parent, or gosh, even like a teacher or a coach or somebody in your life who like you have some memories with, right? Where like they seemed really disappointed in you, or it seemed like they turned away from you whenever you like, were feeling at your worst, right? When like you probably needed somebody at the most in that moment. And what if they came back and they were like, you know what? I've been thinking and I wish I could have done things differently then. I'm so sorry, and I've been thinking, like, just how good that would feel, and so, yeah,
so many people have a lifelong resentment,
pent
up that they never forgive. So huge. Got to keep going.
It's huge. Yeah.
Great.
And so, and so, and with between like Dave and I, it was really hard to say sorry with him. I think that like we had met at a time when like that I was, and so because we met when we were so young, we kind of brought some of that old stuff into the marriage, and it was hard like things to break, hard themes to break between our marriage. But we've gone a whole lot better at being able to say sorry to each other, and just being able to say, like, one of my favorite lines with couples, right? And just, it feels so good to receive it, and really hard to offer, but like such a softening that can like support couples and like putting down their armor with each other is, I'll come to him and I'm like, you know what I think I do sometimes, and just like own it, right? Like I think sometimes when I'm feeling stressed, like I get that controlling part of me like comes in, and I just got to control everything. And there's like not a lot of space for you in that, and then for him to be able, and then that's like a really meaningful risk. I think initially in my life that would have felt like such a huge risk, because what if I soften and put the armor down, and then it's used against me, or it's attacked, or you see that I'm a mess inside and you don't love me anymore, and like you turn away from me, right? And then there was so much fear, but now it's like, no, this is a meaningful risk. Not everybody earns the right to see and have access to my vulnerability, right? Some spaces and some places, some people haven't earned that right. So I might have more boundaries. But instead of it being like armor now that like I just carry throughout every area of my life, it's like, no, I can have boundaries. But there's also people in my life where I can take the armor down and like show my vulnerability and be real. And oh my gosh, how healing it is to be my full self, like with friends, with family, with my husband, with my children, to be a real person who makes mistakes, who is a mess sometimes, who has feelings, who has needs, and to still be loved, to see that, like, and with my parents, right? Like as I've been doing all this work, I've been so open with them, and they have been so open to receiving it, right? And like, on my podcast, I share some of these stories, and there's been a few times where I've actually asked my parents to listen before I share it, right? Because it's talking about some of this stuff, and they listen, and they come back, and they still love me, and they say that they're sorry, and then they're like, and they say how meaningful it's been to them to see me break these cycles, right? And I know not everybody gets that opportunity, right, with their parents. And that's oftentimes a lot of what can come up in my work with my clients, right? And there's grief that comes around that. And it's still, though, such a worthwhile process, right? Because I think what anxiety is scared of most, right? If that's what was underneath all the people pleasing, the perfectionism, and the like striving and performance, what anxiety, when you really go to the core of what anxiety is most afraid of, it's being alone and it's dying. And but we're mortal. We're going to die. Right. And if I can instead connect with ideas around like legacy and being a cycle breaker and breaking these cycles, then you know what? That part of me that's so scared of like death and being alone, it all of a sudden is like, wow, there is something here that I could do that has this huge impact that lives beyond me.
Yeah.
My children's children, right? Like the cycle, the breaking of the cycle now, the legacy that continues, it lives beyond me here now. And when my anxiety has to expose itself to the fact that like, I am going to die and like some people, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, or like, right? Like, but I can look at the things that I value most, live a life that's in alignment with those things, not perfectly.
Right. Yeah.
But, with those in mind, and break cycles to create change, and have that be part of my legacy, then it's so much easier for me to tell anxiety to get in the back seat and that it can rest and that I've got this.
I love that. I absolutely love it, because this topic right here, just anxiety alone, is never been more prevalent in our society than right now.
Yeah.
Like ever, like not even close. And especially with children.
Oh my gosh.
Have you ever seen this in your career? Have you ever seen this many children being diagnosed with depression, anxiety?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think that
what's going on here?
I think there's two things there. I think that one is that it's actually always been something that kids experience because they're human beings, right? And like we just now have more awareness to assess and to treat and to name and to talk about it, right? And this generation, right? I mean, I think about the digital age, right?
Yeah.
And just social media. And I think about COVID, and I think about just, and then just the pressure that kids feel. But the social media piece, the digital piece is such a huge component of it because it impacts everything from like how present they are with themselves, in their lives around them. There's bullying. There's like, it impacts communication because communication doesn't happen like directly. It's like this like more indirect communication. It's this sort of like curated, filtered, like highlight reel that they're being exposed to. Like, I mean, I remember for myself in early motherhood, I was, I go hide out on the porcelain throne just to like, get away and pretend like I, because I needed a moment in a like spiral of shame, right? Because I just maybe like, my marriage was falling apart and I, had just like yelled at my toddler or like, I didn't feel connected to my baby. And I go in the bathroom and what would I do? Immediately my finger would go to Instagram, right? And I would start scrolling. And now I'm in my real space moment of shame, getting access to and all this data of like everyone else's highlight reel and all these like, just curated versions of motherhood, and just the way in which it pulled me deeper into shame and kept me from feeling like I could tell anyone what I was really going through and feeling, for these moments, which is actually why I with anxiety in the passenger seat, coming with me, I got on social media as a therapist because I was like, if that's where they're going in these moments,
right?
And if what it would have meant to me if I had been scrolling while sitting on my porcelain throne of shame, of like if I was scrolling and I saw somebody else sharing a video that depicted something I was experiencing and told me that I'm not alone in those feelings, and like, just that feeling of not being alone, that this isn't something that this isn't because there's something wrong with me.
Right.
This is something that it feels hard because it is hard. And that would have been such a key thing to bridging me to taking a step to get support. So that's why now I'm on Instagram, like creating reels and sharing content, because maybe in the middle of someone's like doom scroll, they come across something like that.
The doom scroll.
And then maybe they feel less alone and maybe they'll take a step to get support. And that was my motivation, and it's been really meaningful for me. And like, when we talk about legacy, it's another one of those things that feels like, if I could make even one little dent and shift in how we take care of parents and talk about mental health and breaking the stigma so that our kids' generation, right, like has maybe a different experience than how scary it was to get on social media in that public way.
Right.
Because at the time, now there's a lot of therapists on social media, but when I got on,
not that many.
Not that many. It was, and like at the time, there was still kind of the belief that as therapists, we had to be really like private and protected.
Yeah.
And then I started the podcast and started sharing stories and inviting others to share their stories, and then that's where we are today.
And then, so what is the I want to talk about the medication again, because there's so many people medicated right now.
Yeah.
Like, you just seemed to be able to get off of it. Dave was with you, but what about people that are they're...
Yeah. So here's my thing with medication is that I think that there are some people, when you feel like you are in certain scenarios where you feel like you're underwater, and it's like, we could even be doing therapy. They could be in therapy and they're underwater. And it's like, it's like, when like you're underwater and someone's above water and they're trying to talk to you and all you hear is like, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
You can't even hear them. You don't even know where shore is. You try to take a breath and you're just swallowing more water. And it's like, there are certain situations where I think that the right medication for the right person to just get their head above water can be life changing. And then now that your head's above water, it's like, look at here, the shore's over here. I'm right here with you, right? Like, let me help you learn how to take these strokes and we're going to get you to land, And that
would be a therapy thing, you think? Like then?
Yeah, I think that could be therapy. I think that there's a lot of really beautiful, meaningful ways that people can feel supported in getting to land. And obviously I'm trained as a therapist, so I know what that journey looks like. And I know how personally and then also professionally how meaningful it can be. And then, yeah, I think that, sometimes medications or other substances, right? There's so many ways in which we can get into a cycle of numbing ourselves, right? And it's not just substances, right? And not just medication.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other substances, right? That can be, like marijuana can be so great for some people in certain situations, right? Like, and it can become a cycle of like, every time I feel something, I need to take a hit. It helps me just like numb the feelings. And then there's times when like that it can just be the thing that gives us enough like space to like, process things. Like, I think that there's not a black or white answer here to this, but I think that for each individual person to take a look at what's my relationship with the substances that are a part of my life, or what's my relationship with shopping or sex, or like all these different ways in which some people it can become a cycle for them of like numbing, and it keeps them actually from healing. It keeps them further away from connection to themselves or to those around them. And so, I think that, it's such a big question that I think is so nuanced that I would just invite the listener to take a look at, like, when I feel triggered, and how do I know I'm triggered? Like, for me, I feel like in my chest, I feel like a tightness, I feel a pit in my stomach, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling, right? Like, these are all like beautiful data points that like something right now, I feel reactive, like something right now has happened where like I'm triggered. It's just like a little signal from my body saying, hey, things have happened before that like feel kind of like this, and bad things have happened. So like, let's be on high alert, right? So if I feel triggered and then I feel a reactive like response to needing something in my life to like help me not feel those things anymore. Right. Like,
yeah.
Just take a look at that. Just take a look, right? Like, maybe it's social media. They all start with S, like substances, sex, social media, shopping. I don't know. Like, there's others too, but like, maybe it's you find you go to your phone and you're looking for like distraction or connection, but then you end up just feeling even worse, right? Maybe it's a certain substance. Maybe it's you spend money, right, to like kind of feel better, like that dose of like dopamine, or right, or maybe it's there's so many different ways that we keep ourselves from being able to just kind of sit. And then a lot of it is because what we've learned is that when we feel things that are hard, we've got to like that's not okay. Bad things will happen. As kids, that we can't feel that because then it adds to the chaos. We get put on. People turn away from us, right? Like, things get loud, things get scary. And so that's why I think if we can help our kids in being able to like name their feelings, like understand what their feelings mean, be able to communicate about their feelings, right? Like have certain people where they can let it out with and like fall apart with and like be held in that. Because we can't change the hard,
right?
But we can change the feeling alone in the hard. And the like knowing what to do with those feelings to be able to regulate ourselves, to feel like we can then make choices rooted in our values instead of being reactive. I think that's how we change. Like, I think that as parents, they are such huge agents of change in their homes for the next generation and generations that follow.
And how important is it, like, for the parents to be aligned, like, and to be on the same page, because I've always said this, like, if there's a vibration is off or the dynamic is off between the parents, it's going to translate into the child.
Yeah. I think it's so important to prioritize the partnership, right? Like, because if that's fallen apart, like it's gonna be really hard
Yeah.
for the whole family system, right? It's gonna have its impact. Dave and I, we parent differently. We have different like backgrounds, and like I've because I'm like so involved in this world and he's not, right? Like
Right.
I'm listening to the parenting podcast. I'm like, the books are being marketed to me, right?
Yeah.
The parenting books. And so when I have found things that have been really helpful in like connecting with the kids, and I'll share with him, and let me get this. In the beginning, it was like, you need to do this. What are you doing? You need to
Yeah.
do this differently. Like, this is wrong, right? And now I come from it more from a place of like, hey, I've been doing this thing with Ever, right? And it's really seemed to help his confidence. And there's this podcast or this course or this thing that I read that like kind of helped give the framework for this. It's been really helpful. I've been feeling really good about it, and then share it with him, because I think like the world isn't going to be perfect. That's the whole point of this conversation, right? And so him and I don't need to be on the same page all the time. We don't need to be perfect parents, right? Like it's going to be. I think that that helps the kids experience that like people do lose it sometimes, and people get grumpy, like people do snap back, like things are unfair, and or things are confusing sometimes. And so just going into it with like, I want us to be we're on the same team, right? Like shoulder to shoulder on the same team. If there's a problem, like let's look at it shoulder to shoulder together instead of like me against you. And the softening, the like vulnerability really supports us being able to like get to that place, especially when we get off kilter, which happens, all the time. And yeah, it's, so yeah, I think that it's like when I find things that are helpful that I want to get him on the same page with me around so that we can be on have the same playbook, I try to come at it instead of, it was not working before when I was like,
you need to do this.
You need to do this, and like because what it did was it reactivated that like dynamic of controlling, and then him just feeling like more incompetent and disconnected, and like I don't see the best in him.
Repel right away immediately.
Yeah. So yeah, we're not perfect, but we keep working on it,
and that's for sure. Now, question: what's the most common thing? We talked about it earlier. You mentioned burnout. Like what's happening right now? Mm-hmm. Go further into the like what you're doing as when you're a therapist, the most common theme of thing that you're having to tackle within marriages, parenting.
Yeah. Well, I think that what's really unique about our generation now is now we have so many resources. We have so much information at our fingertips, right? Through social media now, like, everything from like what we need to be doing to support our kids' speech development to like how we need to talk to our kids about food so they don't have like a lifelong negative relationship with like their bodies and food, and like, mental health. And we're like, there's so much information at our fingertips, like one that's supposed to be supportive and helpful and resourceful, but we also just have so much more access to pain that's happening, right? And so there's just so much overload, I think, information overload, like sensory overload that just I think comes with parenting, that I think then parents also feel this pressure, which I can obviously relate to like do it all, and I think that now women are working, and men are being more encouraged to like be involved dads and involved parents, and all of this is good, but I think there also hasn't necessarily been like support and like how do we do this in a way that also allows us to still be human and like not get it all right all the time and not do all the things. I think that it just what we have now with the overload of information and resources, I think does kind of make us kind of spin out into feeling like we need to be doing all the things always and never stop, never rest, like it needs to be perfect. Otherwise the cost is huge for our kids. And yeah, so I just think burnout is real. And I think just everything that I spoke to you today about, my experience has supported me in being able to kind of see burnout and like name it and help people kind of get back to their humanity, which is like, we can't do it all. That was actually never the goal to begin with, right? And I think there's like this fluctuation between I'm not enough or I am too much, that I think people feel often actually as kids, right? Like I'm not enough for X, Y, or Z reason to like belong, to not disappoint you, to like, you know, and or like when I feel big things that I'm too much, right? I think there's like this fluctuation between like not enoughness or being too much. And I think that our striving to try to like be enough, but then not be too much, I think is just like an impossible feat. And so I work with a lot of mothers, and I see that that's a lot of what they're struggling with, is those things, and being able to support them and understand, again, context leads to compassion. So contextualize like where those beliefs come from and contextualize the experience of the modern day parent. That tends to support them in building more compassion towards these parts of themselves. And as we begin to be able to do that, it's a lot easier to begin to rework some of these things, rewire some of these things within ourselves, so that, you know, we can slow down sometimes, so that we can take breaks, we can rest, we can ask for help. And I think that, you know, modeling that is going to be supportive for our kids too.
And then how important is it to be, because this is the hardest thing in our society, is being present with those that you're actually with, rather than being here.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The addiction is real. And just so the listener didn't see what you
I was holding a cell phone.
You were holding a cell phone, yeah. And so, yeah, it's
do you counsel that? Like, do you what do you say?
Yeah,
put it down.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of coming back to what I was sharing earlier about like the triggers, right? So it's just like if we have to like gain the insight into noticing the like reactive responses, and like, wait, what was just happening, right? And then like what led me to want to do that, right? And it's like this constant need to like check off. And I really actually think that a lot of times, like if I go to my phone, you know, it's like I'm checking my email, I'm almost trying to like check off the to-do before it gets on the list in pursuit of presence. It's like, like, you know, like there's how many moments when like I've like put my hand up to my kids and be like, hold on. Like, let me just like finish this thing. And sure, like sometimes it's like that. Yeah, I'm human. Like that's okay. Like our kids got to know how to hold on sometimes, you know, but but for me, there's been periods where it's so just the drive to like constantly need to like check something, respond to something, finish the thing. Right. And I think that it's actually in pursuit of presence, but the things are never going to stop. So then we're never actually able to say, oh, okay, I achieved it all finally. So now I can just be present with them. There's always going to be a pile of laundry or a new email or a new ping or something on the news that like our anxiety makes us, you know, really is like, I need more information because this is scary, you know, like, or that like, and you know, just, or that hit of dopamine that the phone gives us, right? And so we want more of that because like, you know, we're feeling stressed or we're feeling like disconnected. And so it's just, it's kind of like noticing it. And now like I tell my kids, like I give them permission to like, if I'm in the car or like, if I'm in the car on my phone, like permission to tell me, put your phone down. Yes. Like there is precious cargo in here, right?
Yes.
And do. It's good. And then, you know, and then at home, like I do my best, not perfect. I just do my best. And now I have a different definition of doing my best. Like it's an imperfect definition, you know, of like, I'm doing my best to work within my hours that I have work and have boundaries and allow the email to sit. Like, you know,
and the text to not reply right away.
Yeah. But that people pleasing part of me that's just like wants to get right back and that wants to perform and I really think it's all in pursuit of presence and connection. But I
agree.
But so it's not, you know, like, and I think that helps me have compassion for like those moments when I get caught back into that cycle. But it's not, but it's actually working against me, or it's not helping.
Yeah, it's funny because I do the same thing. I'll be like, hold on, just give me a second. And I'm like, I just want to finish this thing so then I can sit there and
then I can be there.
But then it's a cycle.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes there are those moments, but I think for me, it's like I have to give my kid the expectation, like, hey, sweetie, like I have this one more thing I need to do. It's going to take me about 5 minutes. Yep. You know, like I'll maybe like I even have like a little visual timer that like the kids like to use, right? To kind of and then follow through, right? Like then put it down and be present. And that's not going to be perfect either, right? Like being present with the kids is exhausting too. So like sometimes it's like, hey, mom's got to go and like do something for myself, you know,
Yeah.
like, and that's okay too, you know? So, and prioritizing that, because, you know, if I don't take care of myself, then my cup is empty. I have nothing
That's
left
right.
to give. So.
Nothing less. And now talk to me let's real quick talk about kids in therapy. I'm hearing about this more and more, like kids at very young ages are also in therapy. What is your advice, suggestion, at what age? How do you know if it's like, because I think a lot of them are doing because their kids are either being diagnosed with ADD or depression or anxiety. When do you know to put your kid in therapy, or are you jumping the gun?
Yeah. So my oldest, Riley, we went to therapy when she was 3, when Everson was born, because we didn't know at the time, but she had sensory processing disorder. So does Everson.
Yep.
What that basically means is that when there's a lot of things happening around them, their brain doesn't know where to focus. And so what to tune out and where to focus. So they hear it's like a lot of data happening at once, and they can get really overstimulated. Riley was 3, her brother was born. This rocked her world. He was crying all the time, and she didn't want to be in the same room as him. And that was really difficult as a parent with a toddler and a newborn, that like the toddler didn't want to be in the same room as the newborn, right? And so we went to therapy, and it was a child therapist who did play therapy, but it was also family therapy, right? Like, so at that time, they were just playing, and like the therapist would play out scenarios with the baby and with her, and it helped us understand what she was feeling, because she didn't necessarily have the words to communicate it, but kids do it through play. But
so the baby was there too.
Well, the baby was, but they were doing it through play with like dolls. So it wasn't her and him. It was like they were just doing it through little dolls.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like little scenarios. Then she would, like, the therapist would see her, like when they would make the baby cry, see that the doll she was holding would like freeze, right? And it was like, you know, figuring out what was going on for her in those moments. And that really supported us in, like, later on when she was diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, like having that context for understanding what her lived experience is. But the therapist also spent a lot of time with us. It was not just like the child goes in there and now fix them. It's like, no, it's like the therapist spent time with us as the parents, helping communicate to her that, like, she's not responsible for the baby's needs, right? Like, that's our job. She gets to keep being a kid, right? Like, she gets to take up space too with her feelings, right? But also then eventually giving her tools for how to take care of her sensory needs, because she does have sensory sensitivities, you know? So, yeah, so 3 years old, our oldest was in therapy. She recently asked if she could start therapy again, because it's just so normalized to her. She's going through some stuff at school where she's having a hard time asking for help, and it's kind of affecting things with, like, you know, this is the first year they're getting grades. Right. So her and I are having a lot of cool conversations about that, just from like my own experience and relationship with grades. And she's wanting to be able to ask for help, but has a hard time like asking. And she asked me, she's like, Mom, could I go back and talk to my therapist again? And I was like, yeah, you know? And so,
she just asked that recently.
Yeah. She just asked that recently. Yeah. And so I don't think that, like, it's not, I think that if your child is struggling, and if you're feeling like I could use some support in supporting them, then I think that it's a great call, you know, and there doesn't need to be a diagnosis. Like, it could just be support, and like building a skill for them of knowing that, like, if they're having a hard time, that they can go and ask for help and not just like white knuckle through it. And yeah, it's been a beautiful support for both me and the kids throughout our lives together so far.
Love it. Now, okay, so we're going to land the plane here in a few minutes. Question. So do you do therapy for, like, so parenting, but also marriages and stuff, like relationships?
Yeah. So I work with individuals and couples. It's primarily parents with young children. So, and everything from like fertility to pregnancy, postpartum, in those early years.
Yep.
I work with adults, and I have a group practice. So I have 6 licensed therapists that work for me, and we're based in San Diego and LA. We primarily do virtual right now because there's one therapist that does in person, and I do some in person EMDR, like intensives once in a while. But after COVID, we all went virtual, and then parents, especially during that season, found it so convenient. And they were like, and I asked, I was like, do you guys want to come to an office? And they're like, no. And so we're just all virtual right now. So we can provide therapy to anyone who resides in the state of California, because we're licensed in California.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have clients all over California.
And then what name your podcast, the name of it?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Holding Space.
Holding Space.
Yeah. And it's the conversations we have there are around mental health, parenting. Yeah.
And mental health is a real thing right now, right?
Yeah.
Now you
it always has been. But...
There you go. I was going to say, you keep saying things like it always has been, or the kids with anxiety, but now it's more in the open.
Yeah, it's more in the open for sure. Like it's interesting when we went and got Everson and Riley assessed and then diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. We were there, they were explaining it to us. And Dave, who was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, like a problem kid, right? Like teachers always had problems with him. And as they were explaining it to us, I didn't want to say it first, but he looked at me and then he was like, this was my experience. Like I've lived with this my whole life, right? And and he was like, I don't even know if it was ADHD actually. Like, and sensory processing disorder and ADHD, they can, kind of go hand in hand and dance with each other. But he was just to know what he was experiencing, to be able to have like accommodations, to be able to like get support around it would have made a huge difference. But we just didn't know anything about that when we were kids, so. All
right. So let's land this plane. Here's what I want you to do. Okay. Let's talk about, because your wheelhouse is parents with children, right? So parents with children that are listening right now, we're not just going to tell them to go to therapy, but we are. But I want you to give them a couple minutes of therapy on what's the number one thing that piece of simple advice that you can give to a family that, let's say, maybe things aren't going well. The dynamic is off. They're butting heads. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, taking what I was sharing earlier about just kind of like just starting to notice, right? When start to notice some of your triggers might be, and I gave some of the examples of like in your body or the thoughts you're having, right? Or just like really reactive responses, like those moments tend to be signals of like a trigger, just like getting curious about what was happening around those moments. I've used a lot of language today around like armor and then like what's underneath and parts of you, getting really curious about, what might be some of my armor. We all have them, what might be some of the different parts of me, right? That like, from my own context or my own history that might, be showing up in these moments that my body's signaling to me, like, through these triggers. And gosh, just even like, I think through the context is the compassion. And then if we can have some compassion for these parts of ourselves and we can build some insight around some of those things, what might it look like to begin to share? This is the vulnerability piece, to begin to share that. It doesn't need to be with a therapist, but to share, to share that piece with somebody in your life who feels safe, with your partner, right? So maybe the softening, right? With a gentle startup of like, what I think I do sometimes, or there's this thing that I've been really struggling with and I want to share it with you, right? To begin to practice putting the armor down and opening up with some of these things, this vulnerability, because your kid is really vulnerable too.
Right,
like they carry these feelings too. And the more and more that we get a chance to name these things for ourselves, open up to people, see that actually like what is the most courageous, strong thing we can do is actually vulnerability, right? Like, and connecting with those around us. That the more and more we're able to do that, the easier it is to be able to support our kids to being able to do that. And the less likely the fact that like they are going to present these parts of ourselves out into the world, it's not going to trigger us as much, right? And so I think just reflecting a little bit on that for ourselves, and then taking the meaningful step of like opening up and sharing that part of yourself with someone, your partner, a friend, a family member. I think just that, exposing ourselves to that and seeing that we can survive it, and gosh, maybe even feel support around it and love around it. I think it then makes it easier for us to show up for our kids in those ways. And I think that the world needs, the next generation needs to be able to like feel their feelings and get support and ask for help and like be curious about context. I think that the world needs that. So
yes.
That's one thing that we can do to create some big change.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Cassidy Freitas.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I could ask a million more questions here. I'm fascinated by this. This was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing some of your very valuable time with us, Doctor. Once again, the podcast is Holding Space.
Holding Space, yeah.
Where I saw you, she's on Instagram, and your Instagram is?
At Dr. Cassidy.
We're going to put all your stuff on when we post up these videos as well. So Cassidy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Real Deal Talk. That's a wrap. Let's go.